you may have watched a video of mine I made recently about just the widespread famine in Gaza and how, we're just watching this in the West unfold and nothing is being done to stop it. And something horrific I've been thinking of lately, so this isn't a very nice video if you want to stay in a good mood for the day and maybe come back to it another time, is we are actually being prepared for something far worse. And you're going to ask yourself, what is worse? What is worse than what has been happening? And I wouldn't say it is going to be worse in terms of like the concentration of what's going to happen, but we are being subjected to this in terms of watching it and the media forcing us to watch these things without, knowing nothing can be solved, is because there is a coming climate refugee crisis in the next few decades, and Europe are not going to act in the interest of humanity. Europe is not going to save these people. We've already seen precedent actually that Europe is going to kill these people, and Europe is not going to let people in seeking asylum, fleeing like famine, fleeing these uninhabitable temperatures that are going to sweep the Middle East. Now, some people might say, well, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, they're developing all these technologies like cloud seeding and various different buildings that will cool down these hot cities. And these are hot cities anyway. They have always been hot. They're in the desert, some of them. So they'll be fine. And I hate to break it to you, but royal families and autocracies developing very expensive technology to cool down their own cities built on slave labor, they're probably not going to be sharing that around the poorest parts of the Middle East that will be suffering the most. Places that don't even have air conditioning and they're more like architectural ways of cooling their living spaces aren't going to cut it when the temperature gets so high. So of course what's going to happen on top of, future wars over resources and water is there's going to be a mass exodus from places that are currently inhabited by a majority Muslim population. Now, you've seen over the last 3 decades the crazy ramp up in Islamophobia used to justify every crime under the sun against people living in the Middle East, whether that be in Iraq, whether that be in Gaza and Palestine, whether that be in, not technically like the Middle East, but in Central Asia with Afghanistan, which is lumped in with the rest of them. And this is being done to get you used to what's going to happen next, because there is no crime being born in a place that is, destroyed by the climate or anything, war, poverty. You deserve as a human being, and it's a human right, to live a life with dignity and respect with an access to resources. And seeking asylum in richer countries is not a crime. And these countries should accommodate these people, and they should prepare now so we have the resources for these people to accommodate them. But what do you think is going to happen? Prepare now, spend money, make sure we're ready, or ramp up xenophobia where you're getting people scared of their Uber Eats drivers being asylum seekers because what? Being an asylum seeker makes you a scary criminal? But that's where we're at in the UK, and that's a Labour government doing that. When Reform get in 4 years, what the fuck do you think they're going to do? When all these fascist parties get in across Europe, what do you think they're going to do? They're not going to be accommodating. So I want to talk about all of this today. So before we go further with the video, I want to shout out 2 important things that I feel like are relevant and I feel like people who care about the content of this video will care about. So one fundraiser of a Palestinian called Amjad Hamad, who was 26, living in Gaza. Obviously, in these videos, we are talking about the brutal conditions, the famine in Gaza, and this is, of course, just one of the many fundraisers that you probably would have seen, would have donated to. Someone in the community on Patreon asked me specifically to shout out this one. As of the time of the recording, the 25th of July, Amjad is still alive, and I'm going to leave a link to his fundraiser in the description, so please go check that out and read his story on the fundraiser. And another thing I want to shout out related to the video as well, some of you might have seen in the UK recently that Palestine Action have been classified as a terror group and you can be charged with a terror offence for supporting them. But this is actually a more recent development of the brutal treatment people in this group have received. So there's a group called the Filton 18 who in August 2023 did civil disobedience against Ilbit Systems UK, which is a subsidiary of the largest manufacturer of arms for the Israeli military, and they are currently being held in prison without trial. And I'll put a page onto one of the Filton 18 who's called Yulia, a 32-year-old woman from Manchester. And on this page, you can look up ways to pressure your local MP and spread awareness about the Filton 18 and how you can help with their case. So both those links will be in the description, and please check both of them out. So just to set the scene, before we get into this a bit more, I'm going to read an article. The Middle East Institute reporting getting ahead of the Middle East's climate refugee conundrum, and that talks about like various ways people can come together to stop things. So it says here, warming temperatures, droughts, and destructive sandstorms are some of the realities that await the MENA region in the next half century. Rising temperatures will exacerbate already harsh climates, making some parts of the region uninhabitable and forcing residents to adapt or leave. States already embroiled in conflicts like Syria and Yemen will likely see even more immigration, while a sharp influx of refugees from neighbouring areas would put further pressure on state structures of poorer transit or destination countries in the region, such as Lebanon and Jordan, themselves the most water-stressed nations on Earth. 2017 World Bank study notes that the Gulf states will also face increasingly depleted water supplies in the next 50 years. Water scarcity could potentially cost countries across the region 6 to 14% of their GDP. For example, production from Egypt's agricultural sector could potentially fall by up to half by 2060. An unfortunate truth that we're beginning to see play out is that those who contributed least to climate change are the ones now being impacted by it first. The people of the Middle East are already at the forefront of the crisis, facing problems like declining access to clean drinking water and an increasing prevalence of severe heat waves. And this is the important part, that climate refugees are not officially recognised on the same standing as general asylum seekers fleeing things like war by the UN. And conspiracy theory, because of who dominates the UN, the Western nations, I don't think this is ever going to be taken seriously, because under international law, if you treat these people as asylum seekers, even though we've seen people completely disregard international law in regards to asylum seekers, it gives you easier justification to do these terrible policies if you frame them all as migrants and not refugees and asylum seekers. So the article is saying many migrants have arrived in European countries via asylum grants, a status under international law signifying that a person can no longer survive in his or her own country of origin. This admissibility for asylum, however, is not applicable to climate refugees, even though some estimates suggest that by 2050, 1.2 billion people will be displaced by the intensifying climate and weather events. According to the definition established in 1951, a refugee is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion. This does not encompass the destruction of one's home due to unlivable conditions caused by climate change. As such, climate refugees cannot claim asylum under any recognised international law, on the other hand, leaving them with little to no access to legal protection, and forcing state institutions in the Western world and beyond to navigate this legal grey area and improvise a workable response. So I think climate refugees not being recognised in the same way as traditional asylum seekers, like I said, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, because we've seen across Europe, whether that's in Spanish enclaves in Morocco, we've seen it in the Mediterranean Sea with both Greek and Italian coast guards and the sinking of many migrant boats, and how apathetic they are to people drowning in the ocean, and that includes in the English Channel as well, that these governments, often run by fascists or liberal fascists, they don't want these people to come here. And again, we've already seen so much crazy fear-mongering about the social implications of destroying Europe by importing millions of Muslims and how that will fundamentally change our culture into something backwards. Again, this is the culture that is currently armed and facilitates the genocide of primarily Muslim people in Gaza, saying that these people coming here will make us worse off as a society. I think if we're talking about morals, they'll probably make us better off, because we've shown we are a deeply immoral group of countries in the European Union. But again, this is something that is going to happen. And the hard thing with climate change is it will happen slowly. It won't be like a conflict. It won't be like even what's happening in Gaza. It won't be this thing that is very concentrated, but it will be different waves of asylum seekers fleeing their homes because of the climate increasing. When we say that, people might imagine like, oh, it's too hot to live in the home. No, it completely will destroy ecosystems, agricultural sectors, ability for people to get water. And that's beyond the conflicts over resources that are going to come up in this region because of the scarcity. So these people will flee. They will flee to Spain. They will flee to Turkey. They will flee across the Mediterranean. And they have every right to do that. And you would do the exact same thing as well. And like I said, we should be thinking now, how do we accommodate these people? The UK population is going to increase because of this. Let's start developing it now. Let's start developing places where people can live. Let's start thinking about how we accommodate these people and how we're going to live together and what steps need to be taken. People are going to be coming with trauma. How are we going to process them and make sure everyone has adequate care? But that's not going to happen. And although it wasn't the intention in the 1990s, this fear-mongering campaign of the dehumanization of Muslims as all terrorist barbarians and stuff like that, it wasn't the intention in the 1990s, but we've seen it right now. It's absolutely ramping up. It started in the early 2010s again, in the way it had in the early 2000s, and it has been ramped up and up. Now with what Israel's doing, it's absolutely fucking everywhere. This dehumanization, and also because everyone is getting so used to seeing people who look a certain way or believe a certain religion, let's say Palestinian Muslims in this example, seeing them be killed, seeing them being put into camps right now, seeing them being starved to death. Everything you're seeing right now, it inherently desensitizes you. When you first see stuff like that, you are outraged and horrified. When you see it for the 1000th time, you don't have any feeling towards it. Now, that's not saying you're a bad person, because you still care about that, of course, but lots of people won't care about it like you. So when they hear all these horrific stories of, oh, Italy has actually sunk a boat, it did something illegal full of migrants, they weren't asylum seekers. Spain has actually done something terrible to these asylum seekers in the camps. The camps are concentration camps like we had in Nazi Germany. We're going to see this. We're seeing it in the US right now, and we're going to see this in response to this new refugee crisis. And although it won't look like Gaza in its concentration, you're going to see mass killings, mass cullings, because these countries will not welcome these people in, and because of various different things. And although I wouldn't say nation states are going to do this just because of capitalism, the reason you're not going to care is because of desensitization, but because of consumerism and consumer capitalism, where you think, I've got mine, fuck you. That is the mindset of the West. I've got mine, fuck you. And if you're someone from Syria or Libya who, you don't speak our language, you don't follow the same cultural things as us, I don't want you here, and I should say that. And the government, of course, is going to stoke hatred, stoke fear-mongering around this, and get people on side to support these actual fascist policies. And what this is going to do as well is turn Europe from being liberal fascist to full Nazi fascist again. And that is just the dark reality we're going to have to deal with in the future. But it's better to be aware of it now, so you're prepared for it and prepared to take steps for yourself. And even in terms of politicians you'll support, politics you'll support, because I'm not saying this as some sort of conspiracy theorist. This is just going to happen. But you're not even going to realize when it's happened. It's going to come in waves. There are going to be news stories about a certain country facing this. And maybe at the start, they'll even be welcomed. Like the first group, they might be welcomed. But then the second group won't. The third group won't. The fourth group won't. And the fifth group, they might start doing things more drastically. And especially if they don't have protections as refugees, this will allow these European governments to do it far more. So, again, I don't know how to end these videos because it's just very, very depressing. But I think it's things people should be aware of. And just generally why you should not support capitalism and capitalist policies and capitalist politicians is this is the world they're creating. And although xenophobia, nationalism, all these things are not products of capitalism necessarily, capitalism created climate change. Capitalism continues to destroy the planet. And a lot of people go along with this because of neoliberalism and self-interest. And as humans, we just have to be more collectivist and cooperate together and not punish people for being born in a certain place. You are not special for being born in the Imperial Core. There's nothing that makes you special. You're not smarter than anyone. You're just lucky. You just won the lottery. You live here and you don't live in a place like where these people might come from. So that is it for the video. Let me know what you guys think, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.